Monday, April 10th, 2023. People like my driving videos, so I'll do another driving video. But short as they are these days, I figure I would probably be best just trying to zero in on a single idea and just do it. Just put a punctuation at the end so that it's not too much or too little. Bite-sized chunks. That would actually help me well in my social medias too, as more people start tuning in and stuff to a non-traditional YouTuber. I don't YouTube to YouTube. Like, being a YouTuber was a realization to me. Yeah, I guess I am in that category of people who, you know, life cast or vlog, or that's a subcategory, because so much of YouTube had to become highly polished productions. People are in it for the ad revenue and the sponsorships. And I had a big awakening to that when it was me, helping raise my kid, and they were drawn to Jaden Animations and The Odd Ones Out, a pair of animators who were part of this animation gang or something, or crew, and they were tied in with VidCon. They did a lot to get youth to go to these VidCon conferences, which Addie and I were at a few years ago, and actually attempted to do another, but it was canceled, so we made a West Coast California trip out of it with their Stingray adventure, and someday you'll probably hear about that from them. So these days people are anxious, and there's a lot of anxiety in the air, and there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The FUD factor is very high. The FUD factor is high for a lot of reasons, but we're living in the time of the rise of indistinguishable from magic. We needed a new word for it, because all the, magic isn't real crowd will chime in when I tell you we have magical hand gestures, which are you working a touch screen on your mobile device. You have magical incantations, which is you talking to a chat bot. And we have, magic spells, which is coding that can be, encoded onto a page. It's coding, so you encode, and those, that encoded instructions on how to do technology things are spells, and those spells are now easily, distributed via the internet and web pages, and collaborated on with sites such as GitHub, but also the spells can be cast right in location on the pages of the spellcasting books that they're distributed in, which are oftentimes notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, which play a much bigger role in society than I think people realize, because 1 in 3 scientific research, studies, papers, publications, the research work could not be reproduced. Can you imagine 1 in 3 where it's like, nope, your findings are invalid because no one else can reproduce it, given the exact same data and processes that you say you went through and published? So the codification and, bundling of all the parts. So, here's what you do, but here's exactly how you do it step by step. And when it says it's taking raw data, here's the raw data. When it says it cleaned and normalized the data, here is the process and the algorithms. Here's what went in, what went out. And you can actually capture that all in a Git repo. And often it's on GitHub. Microsoft bought GitHub to sort of own the soul of developers, because when you are expressing yourself through encoding your thoughts through either a spoken language, which now can be a spellcasting language because AIs can understand you, chatbots can understand you, so actually talking is the same as casting spells, whereas it used to be you had to work in very particular languages and you couldn't speak it. You had to work in particular written languages, machine languages. And of course, I'm a fan of Python, which I'm talking about all the time. But, it goes way back to the point where there were not even words. There's assembly language, which is like, machine byte code instructions. So it looks like a bunch of hexadecimal codes, 0 through F, I believe it is. And, you can express everything a computer does with just that, but you wouldn't know it by looking at it because, it's converted into alphanumerics, it's converted into bitmaps and graphics and videos and sound and, all these bit streams going on doing different processes that used to have to be done ahead of time but is increasingly done in real time, and the hardware is getting optimized for the job of the software, so when there's a bottleneck, those bottlenecks magically melt away and neural networks become easier and cheaper and lower power on more clusterable hardware, so that the overall neural network size can be potentially unlimited and scalable, right? So we're rapid, and with the learning processes having advantages over how humans learn, because humans don't backpropagate, but backpropagation, taking what you learned weighting-wise and then reapplying it to an experience you had earlier in life to see if you could make better conclusions, is something machines can do that humans can't do, because we can't replay our experiences like a VCR, a perfect recording, the way computers can. So computers can backpropagate their learnings and learn better and faster than us, and then the size of their brains can grow beyond the size of ours, number of neuron-wise synaptic network possibilities, and the limiting factor is heat and power. So these things have to become lower cost. Maybe we make them work more like biological circuitry, and they, become, that thing that's often in sci-fi, like wet brain tech, right? Biological computers. They're better for AI. So we're definitely living in a time where the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, it's throwing people into it. It's spiking the FUD factor real high, and they're looking for guidance, advice. They need some, maybe pointers on what to do next on a sort of day-to-day basis. If I should be doing new things to position myself better in this crazy future we're going into, what should I be doing? And so a lot of attention is going into prompting, because we can already speak English or whatever your spoken language is, so it's very appealing to say that you can become one of the most expert programmers by just being able to logically talk AIs into doing your bidding, and there's validity to that. That is not an invalid approach, it's just not my favorite approach. Because you see, different categories of magic will continue to exist, and this new category being created by which the spoken language becomes a legitimate spellcasting language is not the be-all end-all, because you're dealing with a different API, you're dealing with a different set of possible realities because of what language does. Language is a tool for thought. The things in your head are perhaps a bit excessively abstract until they're forced through the tool of language to articulate it into an encoded set of symbols arranged just so that when played back, when the symmetrical decoding process occurs, the original conditions are reproduced, often in the mind of human beings, other forms of life, or to an AI, encoding and decoding and being forced through language as a way of turning it into articulate thoughts. Okay, you follow? Different languages enable different kinds of thought. Probably one of the most striking ways to accept that, to realize that, is that artists whose language is visual paint on a canvas is very different than words on a screen. I was going to say words on a page, but who uses paper anymore? Language tools in the traditional sense that we think about it, like spoken and written and computer programming languages, use these streams of phonemes? Yeah, I think that's it. Little sound bites that when put together become larger symbols, which when put together become larger symbols. Sounds become syllables, syllables become words, words become symbols for real things that could be represented with a single glyph, like is done in, more hieroglyphic languages, like, Egyptian, and I'm not sure Sumer. No, Sumer, then there's like literal stuff. I think South Korean and Sumerian both have these inflection rules so that it's really granular, precise language, really useful when high resolution is required for expressing things. But then when you really need machine level precision in how you express things, when you're expressing more than just these abstract notions for human thought, when you're expressing algorithms to be played back by a machine, like a knitting loom would be a great example, or a player piano. There were arrangements of codes before computers that allowed machines to play back, pre-imagined automations. Those were digital examples of what also was being done with analog at the time, with a needle bouncing up and down from sound waves, amplified sound waves, carving grooves into vinyl. Or actually, I guess it carved grooves into wax, and then the wax was used as a cast for vinyl. And then you could make a certain number of vinyl imprints from that cast before it was no good. So there was this real recording of an original event, and then a high resolution first generation set of records made, and then lower resolution copies of those copies, and so on. And it's a very appealing image because there's higher value in earlier original imaging of things. The closer to analog you record, the more details of the original event is there. And that gets to questions of reality, because it from bit, as John Wheeler, one of the old physics mathematicians, I guess a teacher of Richard Feynman is how John Wheeler might be remembered greatly these days. But he was one of the first proponents of information theory to the depths of fundamental reality principles. It from bit, from information becomes solid objects. So there are beliefs that that's where the deep understanding of reality will really come from one day. How binary bits on and off, how a binary 1 and 0 system can possibly be expressed at the tiniest, perhaps call it a pixel level of reality. But then it still gets fuzzy, because what's being turned black and white, what's being reduced statistically to a bit, question mark. And the answer is probably something much different than a binary thing. And that's where string theory and superstring theory and supersymmetric string theory all come from, that maybe down at that tiny level where seeing things and the ability to observe all goes out the window, perhaps there is a string or a loop. There's the loop quantum gravity people, who are kind of like the string theory people, except their strings are loops and are down at that Planck level, inside a point at which we can't know anything smaller, because whatever, scientific experiments. And quantum mechanics is a way of using calculus and probability in order to do a lot of hand waving down at that tiny level. Sprinkle in a little bit of what seemed like true random, make people cheerlead this whole, approach because it predicts things accurately. It does predict things accurately, but statistics and calculus can give you a system that predicts things accurately without actually having taken full measure of what's down there underneath. We don't know what quantum mechanics is telling us. It's telling us to shut up and calculate and be happy that it's working for you. That's what it's telling us. So, we as a self-aware, sentient life form, labels are terrible. We as a thinking machine made of wet parts are starting to ask big questions and conduct experiments to find answers. And if there are glitches, if it is a simulation, and of course it's a simulation, but what is the difference between a simulation and reality if both of those are just labels and you're just talking about the rules of existence playing out on some substrate made up of what can't be broken down any further? And from inside that system that is set up, you can't see down further than that bit. But from outside the system, you can see whatever, strings or loops or bubbles or, vibrating whatnots are down there at that even smaller level. And there's a lot of belief that everything's connected, right? If non-locality from things touching, then when things are moved apart again, there's something about them that can stay close to each other, even though as we see them, they're moving further physically apart. That may be a thing. It may be some, hallucination. That's a popular word these days with the AIs, but it could be something else going on that we can't rule out. Just because we can't easily imagine it doesn't mean it's not going on. There's all kinds of attempts to eliminate what they're calling local variables. And, Bell's inequality was one of the experiments, but there's been a, rapid succession of things like it. That's what last year's Pulitzer, Nobel Prizes were awarded for, not the writers, but the scientists. So the Nobel Prizes went to fancier versions of Bell's inequality that seem to conclusively, prove that quantum is real and the effects that are observed are real effects. But there's two sides of that extreme that are non-falsifiable. One is superdeterminism. We might live in a superdeterministic universe and that can't be taken off the table, but there's no test that can, confirm nor deny that we are in an exactly Newtonian clockwork, 100% predictable given initial conditions kind of world. It might be, can't prove we're not, superdeterminism. And then the other part of it is, belief in your senses. You're taking it on faith that we live in any sort of objective world because of the problem of induction. The problem of induction, which exists both in philosophy and in science, says you can't know anything that your senses aren't telling you, for the most part. Right? You can only know what the sensory equipment of your body is telling you, and it could be lying to you. There's no reason that stuff can't be one big fat lie. And we're all living in a subjective world of our own brain's creation. That's called solipsism. But once you start to accept solipsism, it opens the door to a number of other things that you probably shouldn't, including, first, nihilism, which is, if nothing really matters, then F it all, Nihilism leads greatly to goth, right? Who gives a crap because nothing really matters, everything's going to end anyway, the universe is going to die in heat death, blah, 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 blah. And that leads to despair. Solipsism leads to nihilism, leads to despair. It is to be avoided because who's to say, who's the judge that nothing really matters? If all the non-locality stuff is true, then similar things hold true for scale, the very big and the very small. What's the difference between an object, say, being sentient at the scale of a galactic cluster, one of the largest objects we know in life that has enough parts to be a neural net and have consciousness. Who knows? We don't know. So galactic clusters could be alive. That's one. And down at smaller scales, who's to say that there's no, sentient creature like awareness, down smaller than that binary bit that might exist at the Planck scale. You don't know. Maybe there's a Planckian species. And so at that other scale, galactic clusters, there's a wall. There's one of those galactic clusters that has the wall in its name. So we'll call it a Wallian. So at one scale, there's a Wallian sentience, Wallian sentience. And at the other scale, there's a Planckian sentience. And, how would one even imagine the other, right? It has to go through all the same phases that we at our human scale are going through, because we're somewhere in the middle, somewhere between the unimaginably small and the a little bit more imaginably large, right? For those of us who watch Star Trek, such a being is quite imaginable. The smaller ones are a little tougher to imagine. So I'm just throwing in a little extra driving here because I'm not done this talk. So for those of you who tune in for my car driving, and I'm taking the worst possible road with all this construction going on, I'll probably find a different way back later. But I'm just doing a little exploring because I can afford the time right now. And I usually don't do this when I'm driving somewhere I don't normally drive, because your head's got to be in the game to get where you're going. But if you don't have a particular destination in mind, then driving and talking suddenly become a lot more compatible. Because, if you had someone in the car and you were talking to them, same thing, right? I'm not fidgeting with the camera. Occasionally at like a stop, I'll adjust it to make sure that the vibration isn't too bad. I don't want it shaking around too much on you. Doop, 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 doop. Okay, so ways to think, I think, is where I was going with this, is recalibrating. So there's so much that goes on in life that pushes you this way and that. No matter what you think you don't know. So Gödel's incompleteness theorem tells us that any language, any way of describing a thing can create a statement that, cannot be proven. Things that are in contradiction with themselves. It's related to a paradox. It's related to, this statement is a lie, which can be different things based on how you interpret it. And all language, therefore, when you take the fact that all language is imperfect, and you add it to that the fact that all experience is, unknowingly objective. You can't know it's objective. It might all be subjective. Problem of induction, when you combine the problem of induction with the imperfection of language, you get a lot of questions floating out there in the air. Does anything really matter? Is anything real? Can we be certain of anything? What about morals and ethics? Well, a lot of that arises from us being social, which arises from us being mammals. So, when we imagine things out there that are unlike us, the terrifying thoughts are when it's not of a common mammal-like lineage. If it's of an insect lineage, I had to rewatch Star Trek Enterprise. Actually, I watched it for the first time. The Star Trek that everyone likes to disrespect on. That the Star Trek that killed the series, they like to say, until it came back, of course. So it did not kill the series. The world just changed so much around that time that it couldn't survive the economics of what was going on. And yeah, there were a lot of people tired of the old Star Trek writing style. I can see that. it was a little bit too campy and old white man sensibilities. Still, even after all this time, even the fact that the original Star Trek was progressive, except it had the mini skirts and the stereotypes. So nothing's perfect, but you take what advances you can take when they occur. And there's a lot of advances occurring right now. A lot of advances. The world is going to be changed in as easily as large of a way as it was, people equate it to mobile and the internet before it, the web and the internet. And then, it gets equated to like fire and the wheel. And then, the fatalism and the nihilism all sets in about how it's gonna one day replace humanity. Well, not if we keep it empathetic. The large language models behind ChatGPT and Bing and Bard, and the ones that are making such a big splash with the public right now, have all read Shakespeare. Let's start by putting it that way. Now, there's more depth to the discussion than that, but they are forced into a sort of awareness by using human tools for thought. They are very much tied to the learning patterns of humans, if not the mechanics of learning, because they can back propagate and have feedback, real-time learning feedback systems with a accelerating effect humans could never hope to achieve because of back propagation. I don't think people understand. That means the more you learn, the more you retroactively learn against everything you learned in the past. It's like two lenses in front of each other. A magnifying glass is cool, but line them up with in front of each other, and you've got a telescope. And telescopes are even more cool, you see. I guess I want to take this way to get home. Yeah, right, that makes sense. It's always interesting to just drive around and explore. You get to know an area better, or for worse. And it gives you time to think. I got a little hunk, but that's not against me. That's just people turning here. Some of these corners you can turn after a stop on red. I don't think this one is, though. That's sometimes what people are trying to tell you, but not in this case. Altering what your attention is put on rapidly without losing state of the last thing. Humans do multitask, but then humans don't multitask. You will hear both opinions, and both are the truth. There is an example of true and false at the same time. Can humans multitask? Well, certain things not well, and certain things really well. So as the fear and uncertainty and doubt descends on everyone, because for some reason it feels like maybe it's even so much worse than fire in the wheel. Maybe this is, the seeds of our own demise or whatnot. You take a step back and you go, things just usually don't change that fast. Moore's Law and Murphy's Law are at odds. Moore's Law is going to make the neural networks cheaper, faster, lower power, better. Every year-and-a-half cycle for whatever money you say, that's not going to stop. So the substrate, the brain's substrate material, is going, the matter that can think, matter that has the latent potential, the white blood cells or the stem cells of thought and sentient, and honestly, things that are going to be indistinguishable from life and living creatures. Our machine children, the matter of our machine children is coming into being. Like you hear Tensor, the new Tensor, CPUs, TPUs from Google. So there's a battle between NVIDIA and Google now to create this kind of hardware. A lot of it's already in our phones, doing the face recognition of unlocking our phones and our iPhones. Little bits of AI hardware, neural networks that do certain jobs like recognizing things. Image recognition is a sweet spot for them. Better. However, they can't be suddenly networked large enough to create Skynet and to take over. And there's hardware limitations everywhere on that front. These things are not going to necessarily break free. They're not going anywhere. So if they're locked into whatever GPU cluster or otherwise hardware that is giving them the ability to think, what else might they do from that position? Well, if they're on the internet, there's anything you can do on the internet, which is where a lot of the terror comes from, because like cracking into a military network and launching things and stuff, right? Starting World War III, that concept of AI stuff blending together with internet things. It goes back to war games and probably sci-fi long before that. And yeah, so you gotta watch it when you have things that could potentially, all the hardware that has that potential should probably have at least a team of humans spending some tender love and care on I want to go off in this direction. I need to exit here to get back to where I'm going. Making sure that stuff doesn't happen. In the same way that an intelligence network would keep stuff from going down from signals that are occurring here and there that show the activity of whoever, be it artificial or non-artificial intelligence. Intelligence that is humans or intelligence that is made by humans, because that's the only difference between AIs and I's. You and I are intelligences of a biological nature. And there are also intelligences of a human-made nature. Those are the artificial ones, artificial intelligences. Oh boy, I really did that wrong. Well, I'll be going for a little ride. I did not mean to go over a bridge, and I'm going over a bridge. But I will keep this because this is a life marker. I felt the need to continue this video. I got positive feedback from the last people who, you know what? I'm gonna make an IKEA stop out of this. I need to pick something up. So I shall. But I'll probably wrap this up quick, because in seeking that guidance, people are going to be trying new things, and they're going to have to do it well enough to not be marginalized against all competition, also trying all new things under these new circumstances. New circumstances being that there will be all kinds of intelligences for hire cheap. Your robot army is an Amazon service. At least from the software perspective, your software robots can be virtualized in the cloud, and you have to just pay some sort of usage fee. That seems about right. And that's the state we're in. And the last couple of videos I shot for YouTube showed how I'm looking for IKEA signs. Left or right, left or right. I'm just gonna guess right. And again, it doesn't matter because this is mostly about extending this video, and then I'll find my way back on my own time. Doop 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 doop. Who knows? I may end up living in Jersey in not too long. I wanted to be as close as possible initially to the kid when I moved back from the Poconos. So I put myself at a place where I could just be there right away. And then as they get older, these constraints, I think, will be loosened. And eventually I'll do a road trip to get it out of my system, probably with one of those solar cars. Not just electric, but solar. Drive 100 miles a day and do the United States over a period of a couple of years. Get Canada and maybe Mexico in. Baja Peninsula, I don't know. Do a lot of camping. Let my cats live somewhere else for those couple of years. Hopefully get them back once the adventure is over. What else? Yeah, and fill my head with stuff and myself with skills between now and then, because you've got a automatic coach in all things. Life advice. Oops. Is it still recording? My phone is still recording even after falling. That was just the stand here. So I really will wrap up. That's my sign, because I can't do that while driving. I'll be that one of those sources of advice, actually doing these things I'm at right now. I'll be one of the sources of the advice for how to deal with all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of the new age. Deal with surprises as they come up, and have at least one implementation of it for myself that is working for me professionally. Feeding my wallet, feeding my soul. Hopefully helping me achieve higher life satisfaction. And just generally in all things, making my life better instead of worse. And sometimes you go off the beaten track, right? The idea in life is that if you stay on exactly the well-worn roads and you don't pay the tolls ever when you encounter them, you won't get the reward of those things that are out there to be found and explored. So if you want the reward, things must be explored. So I have explored for reward a lot of this AI stuff that is popping up now, because I want me my software robot army, and I'm willing to pay here and there. And I paid about $30 in order for an AI to do a whole lot of summarizing of my blog posts for me. And here's where I pulled over. type my new destination into my GPS and then just follow my GPS the rest of the way back. This wraps us up at about a 40-minute video, and yeah, covered a lot of stuff. Instead of ending on that sort of abstract, open-ended thing, I end on that. Do I do the final thing? Well, I'm certainly going to secure that a lot better when I start driving. But what I end on is putting a fine point on this: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The pointers on what to do, examples of seeing someone doing it. Of course, it's the Linux, Python, Vim, and Git as a great way to speak certain languages that allow you to realize your vision in an easy peasy way. You want expressiveness in the way that artists have a different kind of expressiveness than writers, right? There's a qualitative difference. It's not that one is better than the other, it's just that they have different qualities. There's a quality to coding, which is different. And if you can express yourself in the way that has those qualities, especially like if you see code produced by an AI and you got to use it somewhere, to look at it and to completely understand what it's doing, to go, yeah, to have a legitimate conversation with a machine in a programming language in an easy way that is as natural to you as your spoken language, it's worth doing. That is going to make you fabulously valuable. You're going to be able to exchange your time for economic value in many industries for a good many years to come, because AIs are on a team, and those teams include key humans. Be those key humans, bring those abilities to the table that people who can only prompt in a spoken language, who are cheering this because they were good bullshitters before, now they can bullshit a good response out of an AI. They can't do this, right? There's going to be a real split between people who can create prompts super well for spoken language tasks and people who can create prompts super well for machine language tasks. Be a specialist on doing it on the machine language task side. There's my sharp point on the end of the video. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to subscribe.